Porter to manipulate his performance in NBA games, also bet heavily against Rozier in a 2023 game for the Hornets. Official NBA statement today. In March 2023, the NBA was alerted to unusual betting activity related to Terry Rozier's performance in a game between Charlotte and New Orleans. The league conducted an investigation and did not find a violation of NBA rules. We're now aware of an investigation by the U.S. Attorney's Office and have been cooperating. Details of the game in question, per the Journal. Gambling activity on Rozier bets that day so out of the ordinary, the watchdog firm U.S. Integrity notified sportsbooks and the NBA, something they only did on 2 other occasions for NBA games. Both of those were Jontay Porter games. And in the game, Rozier left after 9 minutes with an announced foot injury. Went on to miss the final 8 games of the season after that. Now plays for the Miami Heat. Frank Isola, around the horn to you. What position is the NBA in right now?
Yeah, it's certainly a troubling story. Ultimately, it will come down to the U.S. Attorney's Office, what their investigation says. You mentioned Jontay Porter. That's a player that fluctuated between the G League and the NBA, received a lifetime ban for his involvement in a gambling scheme. It had a lot to do with prop bets. And when that happened, Tony, the first thing I thought was, this is probably the tip of the iceberg for a lot of sports, because the access right now to gamble is so easy, especially on these prop bets when you're betting the under on points, rebounds, assists. I remember covering baseball before an iPhone, and in the clubhouse, if a player wanted to make a phone call, he had to go through the main operator, so they were able to detail every phone call being made. Now a player before the game has access to his phone to contact somebody who could contact somebody else. Allegedly, let's make sure the word allegedly is used here with Terry Rozier, and he makes $100 million. That's his contract. Why would he be involved in something like this? But we've seen things like this before. You never know what happened, why he may have gotten involved in a scheme like this.
But for the NBA specifically, Frank, and I'll stick with you just for one more second. You are an NBA reporter. For the league to have done an investigation a year ago and say, you know what, we find no violation, and now the U.S. Attorney's Office to say, we're still looking into Rozier. What position is the league in?
Well, I think the league is in a position now where I don't think they're going to do anything to Terry Rozier. I don't think he'll be suspended or with pay, held out of games. But I will say this. Isn't it historically, if the feds come knocking on your door, they usually don't come to your door unless they have something on you that's pretty good. So this story, and let's hope it's not true, but it doesn't look good.
David Dennis Jr., around the horn to you.
Yeah, the NBA has a crisis here on at least 2 fronts. The first one being they could kind of just brush the Jontay Porter thing under the rug to a certain extent and say, hey, this guy was at the end of the bench. He wasn't making tons of money. He may need some money. And the betting folks kind of got rid of the end of the bench prop bets. Terry Rozier was making $100 million roughly. He didn't need the money. Now, if you have an issue where players who actually don't need this kind of money are getting involved in this, it's hard to get that toothpaste out of the tube. Now, the second part here that's concerning is the NBA being seemingly ill-equipped to handle these investigations on their own. Because if this is proven to be true, they were approached by U.S. Integrity about this, as you mentioned. And so for them to go through an investigation of their own, when there are tweets out there, people worried about, talking about this, where the bets were taken off on that night, where there's so much smoke to that fire, and the NBA was still not able to find any truth to this. If this actually comes out that Terry Rozier was involved with this, you got to question the NBA's ability to actually go through with these investigations.
Emily Kaplan.
Yeah, I mean, this is the world we live in now, right? Like, these leagues are in bed with the betting companies, so is our company. And so they're inclined to deny to prove the game is clean. And then if you find a bad actor, they're inclined to throw the book at it, again, to prove that they are clean. I just feel like there's so much sketchy in this situation where you don't get a federal investigation, a story in a reputable newspaper like the Wall Street Journal, or a name attached, whether there's some meat to the bone. And in this case, I feel like there's some sketchy details here. The fact that this happened in a late March game for a lost season for the Charlotte Hornets, where they clearly were probably tanking for a better draft pick. The fact that this happened when sportsbooks allegedly pulled him from prop bets because there was some unusual activity around it. So what I think we all deserve right now from the NBA is a ton of transparency of exactly what their investigation revealed and how we ended up to this point. I'm just not sure we're going to get that until after this federal investigation is over.
And Bill Barnwell.
Yeah, the common thread here between the Jontay Porter case and the allegations here against Terry Rozier are that these are prop bets and under prop bets for a player who does not play very many minutes or way fewer minutes than somebody was expecting. And this is a relatively new thing to the sports gambling world. I mean, gambling on sports has been going on as long as there's been sports, but you could not go to your local bookie 20 years ago and bet on a random player's under for rebounds in a game.
Right.
And that is the new thing happening here. And something that's happened in other countries as well. We've seen in England, for example, there was a famous case where a soccer player tried to kick the ball out of bounds early in a match because there was a market for getting the ball out early in a game. In cricket, an opportunity to bet on a no ball, basically a wild pitch in cricket, led to a scandal. As you have more and more granular bets that teams are dealing with, there's more opportunities to exploit the game. And even for a player who has a ton of money, again, allegedly, there's the possibility that could influence them to do something that they think would not influence the game, really.
So wouldn't it be in a league's position, Bill, sorry to interrupt, just to say, you know what, those granular bets, the ones you're talking about, those really far-fetched prop bets, completely off table now?
It does seem like the easiest way to resolve this is to remove the unders from prop bets or remove prop bets altogether. There's going to be more instances where there are concerns about this happening, whether it actually happened or not, until we get to that.
One thing I hadn't considered until you brought it up, Emily, though, of course, a player and over-under for points or minutes played, all that. This was the end of the 2023 season, and the Hornets were in position with the lottery they have for a top pick, which turns out to be Victor Wembanyama. The incentive to get Victor Wembanyama is very, very high, and that's also part of this. And that has nothing to do with maybe a bookie in a sketchy situation. Just that is what's built into the cake here of the NBA right now. Speaking of Victor Wembanyama, last night's Clippers-Spurs game, LA won by 12. But here's the moment. Ivica Zubac into Wembanyama. Wemby blocks the ball. There is no whistle. Zubac wanted a whistle. Back the other way, as you can see, Zubac hip-checking Wembanyama. And Wembanyama careening off the court, off of his feet, then sprinting back, looking to settle it, separated by the whole team. We haven't seen this from Wembanyama all year, nor a response like that, nor this much heat. No foul called on any part of the play, no technical either. Wembanyama after the game said it was just frustration. It wasn't about Zubac. And they also said he's a player. His job isn't to politic for calls. But when he was asked if he gets a fair whistle from referees, he answered no. David, how did you hear Wemby's frustration and what you saw last night?
Well, last night, let's separate that because that was just an egregious no call. There's no excuse not to make that foul call on Zubac for what he did. But Wemby is facing this sort of generational issue that players of his size kind of run into. It's hard to tell what is a foul for somebody that's that big and maybe and that also kind of skinny. It's kind of hard to tell. Shaq ran into the same thing. And on the other end of the spectrum, Stephen Curry kind of runs into the same thing about what constitutes a foul for these guys. But also, this kind of smells a little bit like Chris Paul influencing Wemby because Chris Paul is a known agitator of refs, is a known kind of finagler of how to get calls. And I think that there's a little bit of him trying to teach Wemby about how to just...
He says he's not going
I'm just
to
saying,
politics,
Chris Paul... Well, Chris Paul knows how to kind of get these, do these press conferences and talk to referees about getting called. And there's maybe a little bit of tutelage that got Wemby involved in saying what he said.
Emily Kaplan, do you believe Wembanyama is getting fair whistles?
So, Tony, I know you don't like when we compare from sport to sport, but what if I compare all of the sports? The NFL is the gold standard in terms of ratings, revenue, and the rules that they've created to protect star players, specifically quarterbacks, magnified by Patrick Mahomes being in yet another Super Bowl. In the sport I cover, Connor McDavid is going through the same thing as Wemby. His drawn penalty rates are down, and it's leading to frustration. I think the issue is refs are taught to judge things impartially, and how can you be impartial if the playing field is not equal when you have players like Wemby or Connor McDavid with such a unique and unicorn set of skills, like David mentioned? Like, it's just impossible, and so this is the world he has to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Bill Barnwell?
The Spurs are missing something, and that is an enforcer, something virtually every young NBA star has had as they've been coming up. Go back to Jordan. He had Charles Oakley earlier in his career. Kobe had Shaq. Steph Curry has had Draymond, of course. LeBron James, Zydrunas Ilgauskas, and then Udonis Haslem in Miami. LeBron said, I've won championships with enforcers and lost them because I did not have them. The problem for the Spurs is the biggest guy in their team happens to also be Victor Wembanyama, and you're not going to find someone much bigger than him, at least in terms of height. So I understand getting Chris Paul, but Chris Paul's not going to physically intimidate somebody who gets in Victor Wembanyama's face. They need somebody physical who is at least going to give opponents a second thought if they want to, foul Victor Wembanyama.
And Frank Isola.
Yeah, well, welcome to the club of complaining about calls. Last night in New York, Nikola Jokic was called for 2 fouls within 8 seconds, the first 2 minutes of the game. And if you look at that play in question, Zubac is the one who's originally upset that he didn't get a foul call on the block from behind by Victor Wembanyama. And let's face it, too, Wembanyama, to his credit, embellished it just a little bit. Now, I don't know how you don't call a foul or a technical foul, because on that same night, Isaiah Stewart absolutely trucked Thomas Bryant, and he got thrown out of the game for that. But I'll back up David on something here. He was kind. He said Chris Paul is known. He's notorious for that, and I don't think it's actually the worst thing. Chris Paul is going to educate Victor Wembanyama on how to navigate your way through the NBA, and kind of doing this lobbying for calls isn't necessarily a bad thing for him.
Who do we think the enforcer is on this panel today?
Emily
Kaplan.
Got the hockey background.
Taking a break by
I
herself
wasn't going to pick myself.
You spend a lot of time
She's
in that
vicious.
penalty box, Emily Kaplan, and not if it's just
She's vicious.
It's not just doing your job, by the way.
Warm, right?
By herself next.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Around the Horn, coming to you from the Seaport. Brought to you by Patron. Perfection starts with Patron.
Adam Silver on Dan Patrick, floating the idea of 10-minute quarters in the NBA. Let's go around that horn. 40 minutes would be in line with international ball. Could shorten game viewing to 2 hours, Silver thinks. This year, average time of game is 2 hours, 16 minutes. Frank, buy or sell, this being the right solution to the real problem of the league?
I'm selling it. He's right about trying to shorten the games. I worked a Knicks-Nets game this year. The game was 2:43. The fourth quarter took 50 minutes. You think I complain a lot now? You should have seen me after that game. The problem is too many timeouts that take too long, and the replay challenges take too long. You're killing your viewers when games run 2:20, 2:30.
But the
That's
direct
speed of the
route
game.
to shorter games for you is shortening the time playing, or could it be something else? Could it be shortening the amount of
Shortening the
stoppages,
timeouts?
commercials, timeouts?
Yeah, take away a timeout, but I get it. That's money with commercials. But I'm not shortening the game by 8 minutes. I'm not doing
Bill
it.
Barnwell, how about you?
No, this tiptoes around the NBA's biggest problem, which is that there are too many games played in too condensed of a period of time. And the NBA has tried to work around that, but they tried to get the Emirates Cup, and that helps for a little bit. They have tried to get the 65-game award incentive, and that maybe has got some players to play some more. But we've seen teams refuse to play their star players, even if it means being fined, because they want to rest them for the postseason.
So you have a bigger
The real
problem
thing
with
that
the
has to happen
number
here.
of games, not with the length of time.
I think teams have a problem with the number of
I hear
games,
you.
not the time of the games. I don't think anyone's going to play in more games because they have fewer minutes in those each individual games. It's about getting ready
Emily
for the
Kaplan,
game,
how about you?
prepping, mentally, all that stuff.
My biggest issue is that the last 5 minutes take 35 to 40 minutes. So Frank is right. The reviews and the challenges are an issue, but also because of the prevalence and how good at players are at taking threes, teams that are up 3 are fouling. If you find a way to prevent that, I think it would make a lot of fans happy.
David Dennis Jr., I didn't consider that either.
My favorite part of the story is Tom Thibodeau being the first coach to disagree with this, because how is you going to play a starters 43 minutes if the games are only 40 minutes long? But beyond that,
Look at
I
Frank's
agree with
face.
everybody. These games are way too long, and a lot of that is what happens in those last couple minutes. I think there are too many challenges because the refs get them wrong half the time anyway, and there's something that needs to be done when a team is up 3 where you can foul somebody and they shoot 2 free throws and they
All
foul
right,
you,
all
and
right,
that drags these games on. Change that rule.
All right, you guys, I don't need extra. Buy or sell 4 10-minute quarters. Kaplan,
Sell.
Dennis,
Sell.
Isola,
Sell,
Barnwell.
Sell.
Thank you. We move on. Buy or sell 2. Here's Rick Pitino.
And as you all know, I'm not best friends with John Calipari. I respect him, certainly. But what did he do for you? He brought the best talent in the history of the game of any university in America to Lexington. He also won a national championship. So he's coming back on Saturday, and I want all of you to show the great class that you have. 23,000 plus people giving him a huge standing ovation.
Bill, buy or sell Rick Pitino at St. John's telling Kentucky fans how to receive John Calipari, who coaches Arkansas, when Arkansas plays in Lexington this weekend.
Yeah, I'm selling this. I don't know. I feel like fans are not going to take kindly to being lectured on how to react to a former coach of their team returning to the stadium. If anything, I would be more upset if I'm a St. John's fan, though. You're doing this in your office, in our gym. We can see New York in the background. Don't you have better things to do with your time in terms of coaching your team than dealing with, lecturing your old fans on how to react to your old rival? Like, move on.
Emily Kaplan?
Yeah, I'm going to cite our star researcher, Caroline Willett, Kentucky's own, who's going to the game. And she's like, yes, fans have the right to boo him and they have the right to cheer for him. But who she's not listening to is the guy that left for the in-state rival who went back to Ruppelman a few years ago and said he didn't give the bird, but she thought he gave the bird, so I think he gave the bird.
David Dennis Jr.?
To paraphrase Cameron and Peyton Fool, people get booed every day. It doesn't take a fireside chat to stop somebody from getting booed. I don't understand why this is such a dangerous, tragic thing if a guy goes back to an old school where he used to coach and fans boo for a little bit. They appreciated what he did. He coaches for another team. They're booing. It's not like people are going to do anything to him or this is a sad thing that's going to happen.
And Frank Isola.
All right, if you guys think I'm going to criticize an Italian guy from New York, you haven't been watching this show. Rick Pitino, number one, let's face it, it's like you just discovered social media. He loves that aspect of it. He's kind of sitting on top of the world again. He's got St. John's in a great position. But remember, he coached Mark Pope, the coach of Kentucky, and John Calipari ended up replacing Pitino. So I think he feels like I'm the godfather to these guys. So he's trying to be magnanimous. I kind of get it. I don't have a problem.
And I know, Bill, you said you should be focusing on St. John's. St. John's is on a tear right now. That's a top 15 program right now. Ooh, Isola invoking the Italian-American from New York angle, and somehow that got points on the show. I have no idea. Kaplan, Isola, show the next.
Keep your mouth shut.
I'm bringing back a story from yesterday because I liked it so much. Jen Latta had heat in her FaceTime over Belichick's idea to rename the Lombardi Trophy the Brady Trophy. She couldn't believe it, being from Green Bay, Wisconsin, Milwaukee in her case. So I ask you now, Emily Kaplan, who you got, Vince or Tom?
Yeah, I really respect you, Bill Belichick. We know you're a student of the game, but this just doesn't feel like something that he would fully believe in. What, you're going to name it the Tom Brady Trophy just as a placeholder for Pat Mahomes, who's clearly en route to breaking Brady's records? That just doesn't make sense to me.
I thought Bill Belichick was all about tradition. Why stop there? They'll get a sponsorship deal, the Pool and Weed Eater Tom Brady Super Bowl trophy. I think it's disrespectful to the legacy of Vince Lombardi, even though he's trying to pay homage to Tom Brady.
So you got Vince, is
Name
what
him
I'm
after the
hearing.
MVP.
Frank, another Italian-American from New York. How does the scoring on this show work? I have no idea. Showdown 2, Golden State 116, Thunder 109. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had 52 in a loss, though. Let me see if I can give away a point here. There's been 11 50-point games this season. For a point, anybody know the 50-point scorers team's record in those games?
6 and 5.
Exactly
Slightly
right.
above 500?
Exactly right, Frank. So, I mean, Frank, what does it all mean, please?
Well, I'll give you a stat. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, since the merger, 2 players have averaged at least 30 points 3 consecutive years. The great Michael Jordan, James Harden, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is on pace to do it. Pretty darn impressive.
Wow. Good stat there. Emily?
What this means to me, clearly an NBA expert, is that SGA is a top 2 player in this league right now, just behind Jokic. He received Defensive Player of the Year votes last year, and he's the 26-year-old best player on one of the best teams that's going to be very good for a while in the West.
Yeah. Jokic, SGA, Giannis could be in that conversation, Luka, but I hear what you're saying. I'll give you a point. We'll move on. Utah Hockey Club getting closer to a name, like we're getting closer to colonizing Pluto. So, we've done this story for 6 months. You know this, Emily. Yeti was denied by the U.S. Patent Office, by the way. So now an in-arena vote will have 3 choices. Utah Hockey Club, Utah Mammoth, Utah Wasatch. Name this team, Emily.
So we live in a world where 2 Stanley Cups can exist, so shame on you, Yeti, the company, which is a sponsor. But this team came together so quickly, and the fans have been so supportive. So I think they should reward them and not make them get another wave of merch. Utah Hockey Club sounds just fine to me.
Frank?
Nah, they're known for the Wasatch Mountains. I've been there, skiing on them. Keep it simple. Just like Tennessee wants to have a WNBA team in Nashville, Tennessee Summit, paying homage to Pat Summitt. Keep it simple and smart. Utah Wasatch. That's the name.
I was not familiar with Wasatch, but now that you made such an impasse, I'll give Frank Isola the hockey point. I can't believe this. Take the big time.
They could name it the Stockton to Malone. And the reserves to the All-Star game are going to be named tonight, 7 from both conferences. Why not just expand the roster to 15 and find the guys that want to play hard every night or in the All-Star game, make it simple? Here's what I would do, too. By expanding it, how about rewarding a guy like Josh Hart, who plays all the time, not necessarily an All-Star? Put him in the game. Reward some of the role players.
23.5-hour break. Thanks for your time today.